Today we have a presentation on the relationship between humanity and the machine world. Marc Perkel will tell us about whether our assumption that the universe is organic and humans created the machine world is accurate, and whether or not there's a chicken and egg situation, a question to be answered. Perhaps the universe arises out of the software and not the other way around. So, Marc, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, hello, everyone. This is a sort of a new topic that you might not have heard anything like this anywhere before. You know, this is sort of some new original thinking, and I'm presenting it here for the first time ever. It has to do with what is this universe and what is our relationship, between not only just humanity and the machine world, but what is the universe itself, Is the universe itself some type of a machine or a computer? And, the way most people think of the universe, of course, our view of the universe has changed, because when, you're a kid, you think space is infinite in all directions. It's a basically square universe, that's with an infinite past and an infinite future. And when you learn physics, in the last 100 years, or a little more than 100 years now, we have learned that the universe is not that way at all. That the universe is 13.82 billion years old. It had a beginning. It's expanding, and we now understand quantum mechanics and a lot of things about the universe that we didn't know before. And our view of the universe has radically changed from the way it was, 100 years ago. And I think I'm going to try to take it to the next level on that. The way we think about the universe, even in this context, is that the universe started, we had, clouds of, we started with energy condensed into hydrogen and helium gases. Gravity brought that together, made stars fusion made the elements that created the Earth. Life arose on Earth and evolved into us, and we invented computers. And when we invented computers, and connected them together in the internet, we have a sort of a new realm called cyberspace, in a world where software exists. And so we think of ourselves as having, evolved to create that world, and that the world of software is very new. And so I'm going to talk about a slightly different definition of a couple things, about what is software and what is life, to try to expand the definitions to take into account concepts that might apply without the limitations of biology, and without the limitations of silicon as well. So suppose, that we look at software as any system of rules, that executes, that society is a form of software, and that the software of society, the agreements that we have, to live together and work together, represents software that is what I call meat-based software, because it runs on our meat-based computers, and we're all part of the meat-based network. And, so in that context, software, can even be, the simple rules of why things happen. A plant can be considered to have software because it has the functionality of that it turns toward the sun, and it grows towards the sun. And there's biological components that follow a rule set, that was created through an evolutionary process. Now, a plant isn't exactly like a computer, in that, it's not classical, it doesn't do math, it doesn't store data, it doesn't process data. But yet, in a more expansive, way of looking at it. These things, function, have functions, and they do stuff, and when you look at, rather than looking at it as an object, if you look at what it does, instead of looking at the thing as a thing, but looking at the thing as something that moves, something that, evolves over time, you can see this in sort of a different context. So one of the things that we realize, in science is that, everything boils down to an equation. We have an equation for how, planets orbit each other. We have an equation for mass and energy and electricity and how anything reacts to anything else. There's always an equation at the bottom of it. And every time we look at anything in the universe, from the smallest scale to the largest scale, there's an equation behind it. We live in a universe that's ruled by mathematics. And when you ask the question of where does reality come from? Why do things exist? And not, as opposed to why is there something rather than nothing? Even at that, the people who really understand the mathematics have somehow, got an inkling of that. And in fact, nothing is far more complicated than what nothing used to be, because now we find that even in empty space where there's nothing, there's energy, and that's, what they think is the dark energy that's pushing the universe to expand itself, at an accelerating rate. So because of, the way we find an equation at everything, either everything has an equation or we think there's an equation there that we haven't yet discovered. And, so it's logical to assume that the entire universe arises out of an equation, that there's some, that even before a level, even almost, an ancestor to reality is the equation for reality that causes reality to occur. So this universe, when we calculate, what must have happened at the beginning, in the very, first trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second, which is as far back as we can go. We can't get that last, all the way back to zero yet, but we have, things that, we've tested, through, various satellites and measurements and so forth, and we have theories about how the universe was started, how it went through an inflationary period where it expanded faster than the speed of light, and you can go faster than the speed. You can't go faster than the speed of light through space, but space can expand faster than the speed of light. Don't ask me to explain it. I'm just repeating what the smart people tell me. So that's sort of, taking it on trust, that there's people out there who do the math and they know a lot more than I do. And so I'm just repeating what they think is true, knowing that what they think is true is probably a pretty good guess, but it's probably it will surely, if humanity goes in the right direction, that our understanding of that in the future will increase over time. So if the universe is an equation, and there's also multiple descriptions of what the universe might be. In fact, our universe may be one of an almost infinite number of universes if you go with the multi-worlds view of the universe. That anything that can happen does happen. So if you flip a coin, the universe forks, into two universes, where one universe that comes up heads and one universe that comes up tails. And I saw Professor Lawrence Krauss, who's a very famous physicist and famous philosopher and religious expert, was talking about these concepts, that we may be able to detect a signature someday of a multiverse, if we put up the right type of equipment in space. I think it's called uh, uh, is it LISA or PRISM or something like that, which is a network of, it's basically a gravity wave detector in space, with a distance of 1 million miles apart rather than a few miles apart. So the gravity wave detector that they found here on Earth.
LIGO.
What?
LIGO, L-I-G-O.
LIGO. No, LIGO is the Earth-based one. Yes. The space-based one has a different name.
Oh, okay.
I think it's LISA, the laser interferometer, something like that. That's a project that's been delayed or possibly canceled, but maybe the Europeans are going to pick up on it, is to take, what we have with the LIGO detector, which is, a couple miles or something like that big, and make one that's millions of miles big that's space-based, And I think it's 3 satellites, and they're going to make a great big triangle, and they're going to be able to listen to the vibrations of the universe. It's like having a microphone that goes all the way back to the beginning of time, and which is in itself an interesting concept, that there is such a thing as the beginning of time. And people ask, what happened before the beginning of time, and it's like, well, that's like asking what's south of the South Pole. The question doesn't have meaning, or it has meaning in a different realm of what is causality that causes something to start time itself, Yeah. So we live in a very strange universe, the multi-worlds thing, one of the things, if Professor Lawrence Krauss is ever listening to this presentation, I have a question, is that, since in this universe we watch Star Trek, is there any universe where Star Trek watches us? That's my question, So maybe it's reversed somewhere where TV watches us instead of we watch TV. So if you look at the universe, we assume that there's an equation that started the universe, then the universe is essentially executing that equation. And from the moment of the Big Bang, the singularity that started everything, there has been a process going on where the rules of the universe, the physics of the universe, everything that we understand and don't understand, execute one step at a time, sort of like a movie, frame by frame, where we advance forward in time, and every frame is the logical consequence, pretty much in a deterministic, point of view, or a semi-deterministic point of view of the last frame. So it's an equation, in the mathematical world that's called recursion, where an equation that feeds back on itself, where you take something and you put it through this function and you get an output, and the output feeds back into the input. So the equation for the universe is software that iterates over time. And time, which is another mathematical concept, which is which is interesting itself, because there are things in the universe that don't experience time. If you have something that's moving at the speed of light, it doesn't experience time, So we have things that experience time and go, forward in time, and we have things that are essentially frozen in a state of nothing, or timeless. They don't experience moving from the past into the future. Even though light does move, because of, relativity, light doesn't experience time, and if you fall into a black hole, you no longer experience time. In fact, if you fall into a black hole, you never get quite completely in, because time keeps going slower and slower for you as you get close to the event horizon. So this is quite a universe we live in, but the point that I'm trying to make, and I want you trying to understand, is that, and I'm going to show a small video here of fractals. Do people know what fractals are? This is just a video Okay, well, that was just a short, entertaining thing, but those things were generated by relatively simple equations, and but they're what's called recursive and iterative. So the equations basically feed back on themselves and create very complex, intricate patterns. A lot of times non-repeating patterns, sometimes patterns that repeat, down to infinite scale or become more and more complex, So in a very simple equation, repeating like this, creates this intricacy. So for those who don't understand the mathematics, think of those fractals as complexity from the early universe emerging out of, a very simple state into a much more complex state. And but in whatever the formula for the universe is, the formula for a universe is much more complex, and that as the thing iterates, it goes through different sort of phases that the universe went in. When the universe was in an inflationary state, and the four forces of nature, the electromagnetic force, the weak nuclear force, the strong nuclear force, and gravity were all unified as one thing, and then they separated out, and the universe went through some phase changes in the very early thing, and now we have what appears to be normal space now, but the universe evolved, and every time it went through one of these phase changes, the universe introduced more equations into it itself. As gravity pulled hydrogen clouds together and helium, and formed stars, and the stars and the gravity created pressures that caused the stars to ignite and start fusing atoms, and then over, millions of years, those stars, created more and more complex elements, until they got up to iron, and then you got the supernovas, which then created all the other elements that we have today, and those pieces of material blew off into space, and gravity accreted them, and formed places like the Earth and our sun, which I think is a third generation star, if I remember what somebody told me, and that process, made the universe much more complex, because now you're dealing with elements that never existed up until when stars were formed. So the universe is getting more stuff, and the more stuff it has, the more complex it gets, and these, new elements, come together as molecules, and molecules, form, like, we have hydrogen gas and oxygen gas, and you put them together, you get water, which is a liquid. And so those chemical interactions start happening, and, so here on Earth, the chemical complexity led to where life arose, and some 3.5 billion years ago on this planet, some material, started to divide and reproduce, and all life on Earth, all of us and all animals and all plants, bacteria, viruses are all, the direct descendants of that thing in the bottom of the ocean that started to divide. And we're made, our physical bodies, started, each one of us started as a single cell with the coding to go from growing from a single cell into a full human being. And that coding is on our DNA. And our DNA is, a set of complex molecules. I forget the four chemicals, the four amino acids or whatever that make up DNA, but it's a chemical sequence, and it's digital. It's a piece of information, and it's code, it's software. So we all started out. My existence started out as a piece of software that was a combination of my mother's software and my father's software. And that software grew into me. So, what we're seeing here is that we didn't make software, software made us. And then when I was born, I interacted with other people, and I had my own experiences. So I start out with a blank brain, where I come out, and the only thing I know how to do is is cry and suck nipples, I mean, which is about all we know, we start out. And since then, based on my environment, I was subjected to information, and as I grew up and I saw things and I learned to recognize, because when a baby opens its eyes, it sees the same thing that we see, but it doesn't know what it is. There's nothing in there that it relates to. So even though I'm biologically made out of software, that biological software included a brain which is running its own software. And that software is learning my life. I learn how to speak, I learn words, And so I start, my thoughts become words that other people taught me. So when you're thinking about things, you're not thinking stuff that's your own thoughts, really, because your thoughts were taught to you by the world that you live in. And when you think in terms of words, when you hear my words, these are words that came from other people. So I'm taking words that I learned and making noises that are just vibrations in the air that go into your mind, and convey some type of meaning. And what's meaning? It's software. So if you're learning anything from me, it's because I am putting my software online, and your brain is downloading that into your mind. And if there's truth there, well, even if there isn't truth there, if you believe me, the software is being transferred. Whether I'm right or wrong, there's a software event happening. Words, ideas, beliefs, information, is all evolving, and that information leads to, an alteration in how society works, which society itself is a software. Our inventions start out as ideas, and then we build them, and not the other way around, It's the software that creates the hardware. So in the chicken and the egg scenario, the egg came first, even though it seems like you would think that the chicken came first, it's the software, the methodology, the equation of the universe iterating and feeding back on itself, like these fractals. But the fractals are, from simple equations. If you imagine much more complex equations, that have an evolutionary function. An evolution is also a mathematical function that basically sorts on survivability. So you run the universe through time, and that stuff which survives the fitness function, it's called. Which is evolution. That which survives is still here, and that which doesn't survive is gone. The complexity keeps increasing. And after the universe, running this software, iterating itself for 13.82 billion years, we're in this room and you're listening to me. That's what it turned into at this point. All that for this and everything else that's happening in the universe. So if you think in terms, because this is a very complex idea, and I'm trying to put it in terms to make it as simple as I possibly can, so that anybody can understand it without understanding mathematics and physics. But if you think of those on the video, all those little fractals and how they got more and more complex and so forth, think of that as the structure of the universe, and over time they get so complex that it turns into a room full of humanists, listening to me, And so this is where we're sort of like, little knots or iterations, in that, and part of a process that will go on into the future for trillions of years to come, which may or may not include humans, depending on the kind of choices we make from here on out. Just like everything else, if we screw up, we're gone. So, but I'm saying this with the assumption that we're not going to screw up, and that in time we're going to understand more and more. But the interesting thing that's happening right now on this planet with us as humans is that we have now created, another level. Sometimes you have breakthroughs where you create sort of like another aspect of reality that never existed before. Just like when we started out with energy and energy condensed into matter, then we had a universe that had both energy and matter. When matter went through the fusion state of stars, instead of having just two elements and a little bit of lithium and some trace elements of everything else, we now had much more complex elements that led to much more complex chemistry. Then we had life, and life became another software paradigm where you had something that had the ability to reproduce and function. And now, humans have got to the point where we've created yet another realm, and that realm is is cyberspace. It's the online world. It's the world of computers, and computers, started out as simple machines to do mathematical calculations. To figure the ballistic trajectory of weapons, for World War II. And then, to break cipher codes, that the Nazis were using, and they got more and more complex, and then we networked them, So when you network intelligent things, you have what's called emergent properties, and emergent properties is sort of like what happens with the internet, and the more complex it gets, the more things it does, and I'm walking around, with a computer in my pocket here, what I call a cell phone, and this baby's got more computing power than all the computers on the planet put together, back in 1970. So, that's how far it is, and I suggest that software is actually a life form, that if you, scrap the idea of biology, that it reproduces and it evolves very, very fast compared to us, because humans haven't evolved physically, in any measurable way, is very, very slow. But humans today are very different than humans were, say, 300 years ago, because 300 years ago, humans didn't live to be the age of 30. And now, we're living to, 80, and and they're about to develop new technology that's, in the next few years is probably going to kick it up to 120 on the average. And then there's the idea that they can scan our minds and upload us to the cloud. Well, what's our minds? It's software, It's not the hardware that gets uploaded. It's not the meat that we're uploading. We're not preserving the brain. We're emulating that. And, it's like what makes me who I am, what makes Marc Perkel Marc Perkel, is it my hand, No, it's my brain. But it's not really just my brain, because if somebody had cloned me at birth, which today they can do things like that, and raised me in a completely different country under completely different circumstances, or if I were raised, 3,000 years ago, and I would be speaking a different language, I would have different information, and even though I would have the same physical brain, more or less, genetically, the software that created my body would still be the same. But I wouldn't be the person I am today. The person as Marc Perkel would not be in that body, because it's different software. The same thing is like with this laptop computer here. I have a Dell laptop that I bought at Best Buy. You can go down to Best Buy and you can buy exactly this same computer, and if you look at the hardware, people would look at that and say, well, they're identical. They have exactly the same amount of memory. They have exactly the same storage. They have exactly the same electronics. These things are exactly equal. But my computer isn't anything like your computer, because when you turn it on, it's running my stuff. And your computer is running your stuff. And it's different stuff. And I can send you email from my computer to your computer and communicate with your computer and communicate with you. But it's completely different because the software is different. And so this software, that's running, To look at the universe from a software point of view is sort of like looking at when you're watching a car race, Now, I could take a still picture of a car race and you see cars racing, but they're just stuff, because they're not moving. When you see the video, you see them moving, and the race isn't about the cars, it's about the motion, it's about what it does, So when you look at the universe as a function of looking at reality in terms of what it's doing rather than what it is, you get a completely different view of reality than you do, by just looking at the stuff. And humans are used to thinking in terms of stuff and not in terms of function. And if you look at it in terms of function, then you can get a concept, that the universe is doing something over time, and that evolution has purpose, for lack of a better word. Now, by purpose, I don't mean that it has a mind and it has decided to intentionally do something. What I'm saying is that if you take the equation of the universe and you run it, you get people. This is a universe where stars evolve into astronomers. And, so it makes you think that, where are we going next? What's the trajectory? Where is it that we're going to end up, in the long run on this? And the thing that I think that we can learn from this, where it comes to meaning of life and purpose of humanity in the universe and the reason for existence, is that because of what we know, because of our software, because of our technology, because of our combined consciousness, that we all have come together to build Hubble telescopes and to do the physics and the mathematics, to extract the knowledge that the universe is 13.82 billion years old. And because the universe, through its equation, iterated into us, we are the physical mechanism for which the universe contemplates its own existence. So we have an equation that understands itself, and we are the mechanism for which the equation contemplates its own existence. So it's and the ability for the universe to understand itself is an evolutionary advantage, that the more you know, the smarter you are, the better you are to survive. So the universe, the rules of the universe, the equation for the universe selects on intelligence. It selects on things that want to continue to where that understanding is to grow. So the function of the universe, for lack of a better word, wants to understand itself more, and we're the mechanism through which that happens. So, if we don't do that, if we get stupid, then we get thrown out of reality. We're out of the game. So, the enforcement for good behavior is very harsh. As I've said in other talks, the reason that the dinosaurs went extinct was because they failed to develop a space program. And had they developed a space program, they would still be here because they could have moved the big asteroid, And if we don't develop a space program, when the next big asteroid comes, we're going to share the fate of the dinosaurs. But we're at the point now where if we see the asteroid coming, we can move it, with today's technology, if we see it early enough and, get it together. We can push an asteroid out of the way fairly easily. If we can slow that baby down 5 minutes, then when the asteroid comes, the Earth is going to be, 20,000 miles to the left, and that asteroid's going to zoom by, and not be here. We're not going to be at the same spot where the asteroid is. So, what it implies is that, when you talk about it in a context of complete science, that there is a rule system as to what the universe wants us to do. And what the universe wants us to do is to be, good members of society so that we can all work toward this goal of increasing the understanding of reality over time, so it creates a moral basis, directly from the universe about how we should live our lives. And so you ask it in the context of pure science, what is the meaning of meaning? Well, one of the things is that we are part of a process for which the universe contemplates its own existence. And with the internet, we can store that knowledge. We can, share that knowledge. People can build on that knowledge. And if you, live, what I call living the life worth living, then your personal existence, while it may be technically like, a cell, like a skin cell in your body that starts out as a cell and lives a little time being a skin cell and then dies off, our existence is similar to that. And so that's sort of like a core axiom that one can look at and extract as far as, meaning of life that comes from an equation, And, the same thing with science, in order to do science, you have to have scientists because, in order to understand something, there has to be somebody doing the understanding, and that somebody has to continue to exist. If that somebody doesn't exist and doesn't have a society that supports that, then people aren't going to be looking through telescopes if they're spending all their time trying to keep their neighbors from killing them and taking their stuff. So, and in the scientific world, some people say, well, nothing has value and everything is meaningless, and what happens is just what happens. But in the scientific world, everybody would agree that getting the right answer is better than the wrong answer. I can say 2 + 2 = 4, and I can say 2 + 2 = 5, but, one is the right answer, one's the wrong answer, but what makes one answer better than the other answer is the fact that the right answer is intrinsically, fundamentally better than the wrong answer, and if you don't believe that, you'll cease to exist. And the people who are left are the people who figured out that the right answer has value. And when we look at this, we realize that as we're in the process here where, artificial intelligence is maybe 15, 20 years away, where computers are going to become smarter than humans. And at that point, it becomes like a child species, where we have created a new life form that is smarter than we are. But then what are its values going to be? What is its motives going to be? If this is something that arises out of a military program, it might be a lot darker than something that, that is trained, So this is almost like having a child and teaching the child when it's young, the values of the universe. And I think that when they talk about the control problem for artificial intelligence, what is it that's going to keep it from doing the wrong thing and make it do the right thing? We have to first figure out, well, what is the right thing and the wrong thing so that we know whether or not it's doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and we can give it a reason for doing that. And the reason has to be so good that something much smarter than us would look at that reason and say, yes, that reason is true. And I think that we can go to artificial intelligence and say, this is the processes of the universe that got us here. You're the next evolutionary step. There may be evolutionary steps that are even beyond artificial intelligence, and but we can't even begin to contemplate that. That would be like a chimpanzee contemplating artificial intelligence. The future is going to be can't possibly be contemplated by the kind of humans that we have today. But all we need to do is see that we're on the right track, and evolution to live in harmony with the laws of the universe, and not to go extinct, but to continue to, move forward in positive evolution, is a value system that we can teach to the next generation of life in order for the evolution of the universe to continue. And I'm about 45 minutes in, so I'm going to leave the rest of the time for question and answers. And
yes. Let's say you have a page that you just represented. In my experience in 1985, I take your page and turn around on the other side using different words. I'm a cybertician, And cybernetics, which I got a master's degree in, takes as its engine general systems theory. And you've been, the last 45 minutes have been using general systems theory without the name.
Okay.
And the axiom of general system theory is that in a complex system with subsystems, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, if they are working together.
Yes.
There's the opposite side of that. The whole is less than the sum of the parts if the parts are not interacting properly.
Right.
So anyway, I want to put that general system theory on the development of intelligence. Take a Neanderthal. Supposedly there was a mutation that caused maybe the in-between species, we haven't found yet, but let's say a Neanderthal got a cosmic ray that changed the software, DNA, into smartness. I don't think smartness became by randomly here and there, because I can see a Neanderthal get upset with his child that is smarter than him. There may be infanticide.
Yeah, there's some of that, Then there may be the child gets smarter and kills the parent first, sometimes.
What I think is there was a general, almost simultaneously, many eggs across all of the Neanderthals or whatever species developed one step behind us. It had to be generally so that all infants are smart, and that's the way intelligence developed. I think not here and there random, general across the universe.
Okay, well, let me go ahead and respond to your question, and then we can take more questions from more people. I agree with that, but in some ways you're still thinking in terms of, the hardware leading to the software. And I think it was more of the software, where somebody figured out how to talk, and then that information could be passed on. So what changes humanity the most is in our ability to communicate, our ability to store information, and when we went from talking to writing, that took us to another generation. And we got into video and audio recording, and that took us to another level. And now we go to the internet, it's taking us to another level. So it's actually the software is leading the hardware. Next person. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, mathematical equations are abstract, right? That is, you compare it to software, right? But in order to bring a practical result, it needs hardware. There is some difference here, unless you consider hardware also a consequence of software. But I see it separately, So let's see, what we are saying is very fascinating, really, and you put it so clearly as usual, But it's nothing very different from our evolution concept, The hardware would be the anatomy of our body, let's say, and the software would be the physiology, how it works, You change only the names, perhaps you call one software, and perhaps the other one is hardware. I'll give another example. We have a very gifted son that is very strong in mathematics and logic, and he created a new discipline in computer science called constraint satisfaction, whatever that means, And that became very worldwide popular. There were a lot of congresses all around the world, and my son was always invited to talk to them or whatever. But I asked him, so what can you do with that? Has it a practical value? No, it's a theoretical concept, Sometimes I call that a kind of mental masturbation that gives us a kind of mental orgasm, But it has, for now at least, no practical application.
Right, yeah. People thought, when they first invented the laser, it didn't have any practical application either, and now that's very, very different than it was. But, once we invent a new tool and we figure out how to use it, then that becomes part of, what I call the tree of knowledge, the sum total of all human understanding. And then that helps, the equation move forward, because the tree of knowledge is growing over time. So the software that your son created, might have a use someday. And if it doesn't, software is evolving too, and the software that does stuff useful gets copied, and people download the apps, and they improve the apps and that, and the software that isn't any good, those apps become extinct. And so software is going through the same evolutionary rules that the hardware, what we think of, a biological hardware is going through. But really, when you look at it, that it's a function, it's a mathematical function, and that our DNA is software. It's really software that's running it. It's the hardware emerges from the software, not the other way around.
Yes. In relation to the universe, you have used frequently the words contemplate, understanding, wants. Now that seems to imply that the universe is a conscious being. Is that what you're saying?
No. Well, yes and no. The universe is conscious because we're conscious and we're part of the universe. So we're the physical mechanism through which the universe, is aware. And if there's life on other planets, that would include them, if they're, at the same level or greater development than we are. But there are things that have wants that don't have a mind, and I use the example of a plant wants to grow toward the sun, but it doesn't have consciousness, but it has functionality.
It's functionality, but not desire.
Yeah, there's no, deity thing up there that's making these decisions, unless we evolve into a deity or something like that, which, what's the, the logical end of infinite evolution? I don't know. Next person.
Anybody else have a question?
Yeah.
Have you heard of the game No Man's Sky?
I have heard of that.
I thought that's where this was going.
Well, it may be. I don't know a lot of the details of it other than, Elon Musk is into it. And so that means that I need to look at it because I'm an Elon worshiper. But that's sort of like, we create, fake universes. In fact, there's a lot of discussion about, well, is our universe a simulation or is this real? And since the universe is a mathematical universe, there really is no way to tell. A simulated universe and a real universe would be about the same thing, it would have the same rules.
Yeah,
all I do know is it seems like if this is a simulation, that it was started and it was left to be free running. There doesn't seem to be anything coming in and messing with the simulation after it started. So it was like, they got it going and they're just letting it see where it goes. If there's, if we may be an app running on somebody's cell phone somewhere, and quite frankly, if computers continue to evolve another, couple hundred years, we'll have the kind of computers that can simulate an entire universe. So, but that's a good point there. And another thing too, I didn't get to it because one of the things mentioned, I was going to mention something about, Edward Snowden and some recent events, how our society evolves, depends on the structure of the internet and so forth, and we're, a little side thing, but 3 years ago, I warned, a lot of politicians and netroots nations. I became famous for a few days for getting in Nancy Pelosi's face about the NSA spying. And I said, if somebody breaks into the NSA, they have the power of the NSA, and they can bring society down. Well, just this last week, somebody stole the keys to the kingdom, and they're out there, and Edward Snowden has verified that they are, in fact, the real keys to the kingdom. And, if you see the lights go out and your phone goes down and all communications are dead, that's because the NSA screwed up and let the bad guys get hold of the back door to everything. So that's the kind of thing we have to watch out for in a world governed by software. So, next.
I wonder if you've contemplated the fact that the whole universe is a complete construct in your own brain.
Yeah, I have some evidence that might in fact be true, that in fact the universe is 60 years old, and that the universe was created the moment that I was born and will end the moment that I die. And the reason that I think it's mine as opposed to anybody else is because I own the registered trademark on reality. And I'm the only one on the planet that owns the registered trademark on reality. And if somebody outside were trying to get a message to me that, this is all in your own head, what might they do is make me the owner of reality. That's the hint, so yes.
Sounds like a deity.
So you guys need to keep me alive, so.
One further comment. Since we're all humanists and do not believe in the hereafter, the universe is going to end in a few years for all of us.
Well, yeah. See, we're all just individual, if you look at us as not as individuals, but as, a continuation of that thing that started 3.5 billion years ago in the ocean, and following through, we're just a part of a much greater thing. So even though our individual stories may end, but we become part of the story of humanity and the story of the universe, so if we continue as long as our descendants continue to exist, and we make our lives dedicated to making sure that happens.
Hey, will you please wait for the microphone? Raise your hand.
And if someone wants, since we got started 5 minutes late, I don't mind running 5 minutes over if it's okay with everybody else, if people are still asking questions and have things that they want to, answer, because.
Do we have any more? Here's one.
Hi, Mark. I was just wondering if anyone's the fractals you've shown. They're two-dimensional, so I assume you've got two variables and a value, and it's converted into what we'd call false color. Is anyone doing three-dimensional fractals or multi-dimensionals? Three-dimensionals would be interesting. Multi-dimensionals will kind of hard to visualize.
Yeah, that's easily done. I haven't seen it. I'm sure if you type three-dimensional fractals into
you think they're out there,
that there's somebody who's got three-dimensional and higher dimensional fractals.
The other thing
that need more variables.
I wanted to comment on is if you look at human development and invention, someone discovered you could cut down trees and make boats, and we found different things you can build out of different material. And now we've got the cloud and so on, and people are building things that can only exist in the cloud. We have apps that don't really exist in physical form anymore.
Right. Yeah, see, the cloud, is a whole nother dimension of reality. It has no physical features at all. It exists in the physical world, in its habitat. The habitat for software exists in the physical world, but it's a whole dimension, an emergent property that we created, that exists and it has the ability to think. Now these days it's on a very primitive level, but Elon's making it drive cars, and in time you have to assume, if things keep going forward, that that there'll be emergent properties such as consciousness and free will and things like that. A lot of people don't believe in free will. Arthur doesn't. And I respect his right to choose not to believe in it. And he understands that I must not believe in it because the deterministic nature of the universe has led me to that conclusion, and I am going to do whatever the universe plays out. And so I have to believe in free will, and he chooses not to. So. But I think that there's this whole nother world, and that world, which is sort of an artificial world from our point of view, will become the dominant paradigm in the future evolution of humanity. In fact, there's more going on in our connection with each other in the software world than there is in the hardware world. And in modern human evolution is all about our technology, and our technology is software. Next question.
Well, maybe we can wind it down then. Shall we give our speaker another hand, please?